Well, this is Mike Rogers. I'm with Granite Grok, and I'm sitting here in Rye with Pastor Rafael Cruz, the father of Ted Cruz, and we're chatting about conservatism in general and what gets us excited, going all the way back to Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and even to Winston Churchill. And we were just talking about how we need to put more and more people of principle into the Republican Party, so that eventually we have a whole army of Ted Cruz's and Mike Lee's in Washington. So we were talking about taking over the party at every level versus a third party. So why don't you go from there, Rafael?
Well, I think one of the things that is sad is that people like my son are the exception instead of being the rule. They should be the rule, but unfortunately they are not.
That's true, and a sad part of that is that the party leadership at all levels tends to promote moderates, as you were saying. The other part of it is it requires eternal vigilance, and really we haven't had eternal vigilance on the part of the people. They have allowed the country to drift, and they're just beginning to get alarmed about what's happening to us.
But Mike, if you think about it, over the last 40 years, every time we have ran a moderate for president, we have lost.
Absolutely, and George Bush came within a hair's breadth of losing because he was a moderate.
But we need again a contrast like Reagan-Carter. Carter is the closest thing to Obama today. We are reliving the Carter years. What Carter did is what I am hoping that Obama will create also. And that is because it was so bad during the Carter years, it gave rise to a constitutional conservative like Ronald Reagan to revolutionize the country and give us the greatest time of prosperity we've seen in modern times. The 5th year of Ronald Reagan, GDP in the U.S. was 7.3%. Now it's barely 1%.
That's incredible. So let me just ask. So you've obviously been here a little longer than I have, or maybe you were watching it from Cuba. I arrived here in 1985, just before that year that you were talking about. And indeed, America was booming, the dollar was riding high, and everybody was having a pretty good time. So when did you actually arrive from Cuba?
I arrived in 1957, so I have been here for a long time. I've been here for 57 years. And actually what got me involved in conservative politics was precisely Jimmy Carter. I remember the Carter years, 22% interest rates, double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment, lines around the block to get gasoline, a president so weak in foreign policy that Iran had become so emboldened that they captured 82 Americans and held them hostage for 444 days. That's what got me involved in grassroots Republican conservative politics to help elect whom I consider the greatest president we've had in America for the last 150 years, Ronald Reagan.
Now, back then, we were in England agitating and organizing for Margaret Thatcher for the same kind of reasons, because we had our own malaise. She had that wonderful advertising slogan, Labour, as in the party, isn't working. And a lot of people were not working. So it was incredible.
And it was so inspiring that at the same time, those two great leaders rose up. Margaret Thatcher in England and Ronald Reagan in America. And it is amazing when Ronald Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. And without firing a shot, the whole USSR crumbled.
Right, and right now Vladimir Putin is rebuilding it because he's a strong man and Obama is not. So what amazes me, Rafael, I mean, I agree with you that the reaction to Obama may well be that we get the same kind of upsurge in conservatism and an outstanding candidate for 2016. But, the question has to be asked, and that's why I mentioned eternal vigilance. Do we need to get to such a dire condition before the people wake up and are willing to espouse a conservative? It's frightening to think we have to go so far down before we realize we have a problem.
But Mike, we're already there. We're already there. We have a total despot for a president. As a matter of fact, we have 3 tyrants governing this country today: Barack Obama, Eric Holder, and Harry Reid. And all 3 of them are handling this country in a totally dictatorial manner.
What about the hidden despot?
I'm sorry?
What about the hidden one?
Well,
Valerie Jarrett.
those are some of the other pieces of the puzzle that, they all, you notice how they just resign, they get a cushy job somewhere else, and unfortunately we tend to forget.
Yes,
Well, I'll
we do.
tell you what, we don't need to forget about those people. We need to prosecute those people that have been trampling on the Constitution, trampling on separation of powers, trampling on the rule of law. This is a nation of laws. Today, the rule of law is a joke.
Well, it is, because Congress has made so many laws, federalized so many tiny little crimes, and enabled the agencies to write rules and laws that effectively all of us are at risk of breaking laws every day that we don't realize. We have what I call arbitrary and capricious law enforcement, meaning there are so many laws that they can come after any one of us at any time for breaking one that we didn't know about.
But Mike, it's even worse than that. Right now, we have a president that, to quote his own words, has a pen and a phone. And he is writing law contrary to the Constitution, contrary to separation of powers, and his executive orders are actually what is becoming the law of the land. Now, those people that just want to contradict this, they say, oh, other presidents have written executive orders. Bush wrote more executive orders than Obama. There are executive orders, and then there are executive orders. In the past, most executive orders have been procedural executive orders. What Obama is doing is something that has never been done before. He is writing law with executive order after executive order after executive order, violating the legislative branch, which is the one who is supposed to write the laws. And the other thing that Obama is not doing is what the executive branch is supposed to do, and that is make sure that the laws of the land are being properly obeyed and executed.
To faithfully execute the law.
That's
and
right.
that is the
He's not doing that.
No, and that's the normal application of executive orders.
That's right.
Is implementation, not
writing law.
Not nullification and creation of laws out of whole cloth.
Absolutely.
Wow. So I think we're in violent agreement on a lot of this stuff. All of Europe is going towards socialism, and I think it is. And England is ahead of us in the sense that they've embraced the welfare state. They've embraced, a very comfortable support system for the folks that aren't working, to the point where there is a very large class of people that don't need to work, don't want to work, and Obama's trying to create that here. The problem is you eventually run out of other people's money, as Margaret Thatcher famously said.
Absolutely. And if we look at Europe today, most of those countries are bankrupt. I mean, you look at Greece, where they want now retirement at 50 years old. Who's going to pay for those retirement checks? Where's that money going to come from?
Well, they found out nowhere. They found out that they had to borrow it, and eventually the lenders stopped lending. And right now the big tussle in Europe is whether Germany, which is the one country that's not really bankrupt, is going to keep on lending money to the ones that are.
The thing that's most frightening to me is when I saw the interviews with the college kids at Harvard, and they were saying who's most dangerous, the United States or ISIS. Every one of them said the United States is more dangerous to the country, because we go and we take over countries, and we're the aggressors. And what are they teaching our children in these colleges? I mean, we all know what they're teaching them, but it's just unbelievable.
Well, that's a very interesting comment. Thomas Jefferson once said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free, they expect what never was and never will be.
Right, and then, like I said, that's why I keep using the phrase eternal vigilance, because if we the people do not watch the people that we have elected to office, this is exactly what we will get. We have allowed the federal government to be the monster that the founders tried to constrain. We have let it break outside of its bounds, and it is going to be a phenomenally difficult task to put it back in.
But you know, one of the things that we need to remember, we have a procedure to correct that. If we look at the Declaration of Independence, it talks about the reason why government is there. It says that governments are instituted to secure those unalienable rights, not to trample on those rights. And it also says that government derives its powers by the consent of the governed. That's we the people. And it says when government ceases to work towards those ends, it is our right. It is our right to remove that government and replace it with another government, and we do that through the ballot box.
Absolutely.
That's why it is so important that we, the people, elect people of principle, people that would uphold the rule of law, that would uphold the Constitution. It becomes our fault when we are not even voting. It becomes our fault when it is a small minority of people that actually cause people to be elected, because many people of principle are staying at home and they are not participating in the electoral process.
Because they have come to the belief that it doesn't matter what they do, we end up with Democrats and Democrats light. And you are right, we need more people like Ted Cruz and his friends, people with real principles down there, because we need people that are actually willing to shrink the federal government.
Absolutely, absolutely. As a matter of fact, to quote Jefferson again, I love Jefferson. Jefferson said, a government big enough to give you everything you want is also big enough to take away everything you have.
I think I've got a sign that says that for my garden. You've been here 57 years and I've been here 30, and we've learned these lessons well, and they're not being taught in school. And you quote the founders better than I can. You've obviously studied them, and it's fascinating. I'm going to quote you another piece, which I think is also from the Declaration. You said about governments that become destructive of those ends for which they are created, and I think it says that we have the right, we have the duty to alter or abolish it.
Absolutely.
And one of my favorite people, Herman Cain, used to use that as a crescendo in his speeches.
And the way we do that is through the ballot box.
It is, initially. And if that doesn't work, we have constitutional conventions. Revolution is the last resort.
But, really, we need to start by having people of principle running for office. And then we have to have people of principle that make it a priority to elect people of principle. That's why we, the people, are the ones that to whom the Constitution places that responsibility.
It does indeed. We the people are responsible for picking, encouraging, and ultimately electing people of principle.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And the people that want to be part of the perpetual ruling class, as Angelo Codevilla wrote, are the ones who resent that the most and will fight a very strenuous rearguard action. Like the famous words of Trent Lott, we don't need a bunch more Jim DeMints around here. If they show up, we'll have to co-opt them. You remember that?
That is a very peculiar saying. I do believe that we need more and more people of principle to be at the forefront.
Right.
That's what all the framers were. Those were people that laid it all on the line. They knew what it would cost to give us that freedom. It's just like Benjamin Franklin, when the Constitutional Convention finally gave us that great document, the Constitution of the United States of America. He was asked, what kind of government have you given us? And Benjamin Franklin said, a republic,
If you can keep it.
if you can keep it. So it goes back to what you said, Mike, at the beginning. We have to be eternally vigilant.
Exactly so. And we are eternally grateful to you for your knowledge of the Constitution that you have imparted, obviously, to Ted and to his enthusiasm for rejuvenating it in Washington.
Well, actually, it was the other way around. I didn't impart the knowledge of the Constitution to Ted. It was the other way around. When Ted was entering high school, he became part of what was called the Free Enterprise Institute in Texas. And this organization created a group of 5 kids, of which Ted was one of them. They called them the Constitutional Corroborators.
Wow.
They hired a memory expert which taught those 5 kids to memorize the U.S. Constitution. And for the next 4 years, they gave approximately 80 speeches on free market economics and the Constitution. So my interest in the Constitution was spearheaded by Ted. I just became enamored of with the Constitution as Ted became enamored with the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And so we both really became immersed in the greatness of the heritage of the United States of America and on what the framers did, not only in the Constitution, but in the Declaration. And I'll tell you, I love those 2 documents. As a matter of fact, I believe that outside of the Bible, those are the 2 greatest documents that have ever been written in history.
And aren't they short? Compare those with the laws that are written today.
Well, today you hear from this administration that the Constitution is a fluid document, that it doesn't apply to modern times. And let me tell you, the Constitution is as relevant today as the day it was written.
What the founders understood better than anything else, they had a sense of history, they had a sense of economics, and they had a sense of human nature. What the Constitution and the Declaration speak to more than anything else is human nature and the need to constrain it.
And you know something, it is very interesting because we have a parallel. At the time of the framers, at that same time, the French Revolution was going on. 2 different revolutions, 2 totally different outcomes. The main thrust of the framers was liberty. The main thrust of the French Revolution was equality.
Right.
You know,
and we all know what happens when you go for equality at the price of freedom.
That's right. And if you look at the government today, of the Obama administration, what do they want? What do they promote? Equality of outcome. Equality of outcome has never worked. That is communism. That is Marxism. It never works. Because you know, Mike, if you work twice as hard as I do, and you get paid the same, it doesn't take very long before you say, I'm being foolish. I'm going to work as little as he works. So nobody works. Equality of outcome has never worked. What we need and what conservatism gives is equality of opportunity. The outcome is directly proportional to your efforts. If you work twice as hard as I do, you deserve twice as much of the rewards. That's free enterprise. That's what has made America great.
That and strong property rights, which they're also trying to undermine.
Absolutely.
And that's absolutely fascinating. And of course, the first arrivals on this shore discovered the same thing. They tried a pooling of resources in the colony at Plymouth Plantation, and it nearly failed. And it wasn't until they instituted essentially capitalism that they prospered. And
actually, you're being very kind to those settlers the first year. I call it that they tried a communist experiment that first year.
They exactly did. And it was one of the quickest lessons in history because they learned from their experience, and some of them at least survived.
And you know, you realize these people were people of faith. But when they said, let us all work together, and let us share in what the land produces. What happened is the strong people, the strong could maybe plow several acres. And the weak maybe were plowing a quarter of an acre. And pretty soon those strong men said, well, we've been dumb. I'm not going to work any more than that guy over there.
Right.
So what happened is they had no crops. They almost starved to death.
Exactly. And you know what you have, of course, is the old Russian joke. We pretend to work and they pretend to pay us.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens when
Absolutely.
everybody gets paid the same, regardless of how much they do.
You see it today in Cuba. Before Castro, Cuba was such a large producer of sugar. The economy of Cuba was sugarcane. And Cuba produced 8, 9, even up to 10 million tons of sugar a year. The sugar crops in Cuba today, maybe 1 million tons, maybe 1.5 million tons. 10% of what they used to produce under free enterprise.
And that's basically what you expect. Well, I've been monopolizing you for a long time, and I know these people have been listening with great interest, but I want to be able to share and to allow you to mingle so that all of them can ask you their own questions. Let me just ask one thing, Rafael. So you are a pastor, you're going around working with pastors. You're a member of an organization, I believe?
No, what I am doing, Mike, is I am working with several different groups doing pastors' conferences all over the country. And the reason I'm doing this is because about a year ago, I came across a very troubling statistic. The statistic said that in the United States of America, there were about 89 million Bible-believing Christians. People that read the Bible every day, that pray every day, that go to church every week, about 89 million. That's the statistic we have. That of those, only 50% were registered to vote, and that of the 50% that were registered to vote, only 50% voted in the last election. That means 3 out of 4 stayed home. That means it becomes our fault. If the people of faith are not voting, are not even running for office, then we get what we deserve.
And the Constitution of this country was made for a good and moral people, and it's wholly unsuitable for any other.
Absolutely.
In other words, we need these folks to come out and vote.
And so because of that, because we're looking at probably the biggest voting bloc that is sitting on the sidelines. So I have been traveling around the country speaking to groups of pastors, ranging anywhere from maybe a couple of dozen to as many as 800 pastors. Probably average about 200, 250 pastors all over the country, encouraging these pastors and showing them, both from a biblical standpoint as well as from a historical standpoint, why pastors need to be involved in the political arena.
That's fantastic. So the reason I was asking about organizations is there any way people can either get in touch with you or follow your efforts so that they can continue to see what you're doing here?
Well, I work with several different organizations that are doing pastors' conferences. The one that I'm doing the most with is an organization called American Renewal Project.
Okay.
We just did a pastors' conference in New Hampshire 2 weeks ago in Nashua, New Hampshire. And these pastors' conferences are taking place all over the country. In 2 weeks, we'll be doing a pastors' conference in Little Rock, Arkansas. And 2 or 3 days after that, on the 23rd and 24th, we'll be doing one in Denver, Colorado. And those are taking place all over the country. And there are 2 or 3 other groups that I'm doing the same with. And then there are just groups like, for example, I came here in New Hampshire, just speaking to, like we are doing tonight with the Tea Party group. And yet I spoke to a group of pastors this morning, and I will be speaking to another group of pastors tomorrow at noon. Now, those were things that were organized by the same people that invited me to talk to the Republican Women's Club today, to the Tea Party this evening. They also organized a couple of groups a couple of venues for me to speak to pastors. So they're happening organically also.
That's absolutely fabulous. So I'm going to wind it up, like I said, so other people can talk to you as well. I want to thank you very much on behalf of Granite Grok. It's been an amazing conversation. So American Renewal Project, is that a website, AmericanRenewalProject.org or something?
I am not sure exactly how the website is. I think if you Google American Renewal Project, you will find it.
I'll look it up and put a link along with the interview. Thank you so much, Rafael. It's been fascinating and really enjoyable.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure, and I hope your readers enjoyed our conversation. God bless you, and I am just delighted to be able to talk to you.
Thank you, sir.
Grok TV.